So here's the thing. I hate these list conversations. I just despise them. However, with that said, I'm going to throw something in there because I think this year it's been incredibly overlooked, mostly because of what Kobe went through. And I feel like we owe this guy, even though he doesn't want any shadow, he doesn't want any spotlight, we shouldn't put him in the shadow. And if you're talking about top 10 and all those guys you just mentioned, please don't disrespect and forget about Tim Duncan.
Yeah, no, Tim Duncan's in my top 10. I didn't mention all 10. I don't know if you were counting. I don't know if you took the shoes off and used the toes. I just threw a couple of the names out there, and I'm happy you bring that up. No, I'm serious. I'm happy you bring up Tim because I think that the lack of flash obviously has penalized Tim. And obviously, we're joined now by Jared Greenberg. He's with us on the Ring Central hotline. Ring Central providing easy-to-use cloud phone solutions for your workforce and business communications made simple. For more info, go to ringcentral.com. So, I mean, the way it goes, it's unfair. There's a lack of depth and intellect for the majority. I don't mean to paint this with everybody, but a lot of people forget the circumstances. And at the end of the day, and it's not always right, did you win or did you lose? And if he loses again, I don't know that he can recover from that in terms of perception.
Well, I mean, he absolutely can recover. I mean, if he goes out in the years following this year and then wins 3 straight titles and then, goes in 9 consecutive NBA finals. I think, listen, I get it. And I'm with you because I've been there, whether we talk about the MVP race in an individual year or we talk about measuring somebody's greatness, you always have to compare what they're doing, not just to their own numbers of prior years, but to their current peers, but more importantly to this conversation, what the all-time greats have done. And I totally get what you're saying. Because LeBron, since basically his junior year of high school, has been in this rarefied air where he's been involved in this conversation with Michael, and then, unlike so many other guys, has lived up and probably exceeded the hype that was given to him, which is incredible to think about when you look back and you say, wow, this guy was put on this pedestal for since he was in middle school, and he's actually now living up to it. So, yeah, he belongs in that conversation, and he deserves some of the criticism, no question. But I think at the same time we're looking for the negative here, and I understand why. But when you talk, when I'm covered the Eastern Conference Finals every single day, talk to the players on both sides, when you bring up 6 straight trips to the NBA Finals, their jaws drop. They don't know how to react to that. It is something that I think needs to be recognized. And when you talk about, like, what Tiki just said about carrying J.R. Smith, like, think about the guys he's had to elevate to get to this point. Yeah, Love and Kyrie are Olympians, and they're all-stars, and maybe at some point, they develop into Hall of Famers, who knows. But he has elevated everybody with him, and LeBron, has carried these guys to 6 straight NBA Finals between Cleveland and Miami, and I think we can't forget about that aspect. I get what you're saying about losing, but the fact that he's gotten there, we're talking about him and Bill Russell.
Jared Greenberg, NBA TV with the here on Tiki and Tierney.
I mean, it's hard to argue that when you think about it, but championships matter in so many people's minds, even if it's not fair. Which brings me to a guy that we talked about earlier in the show, and Kevin Durant, and his constant pursuit of a championship, but the failures that just keep coming along, whether it was 11, whether it was 12 and 14 against the Spurs, and then obviously this year against the Warriors. What's your gut on what he's going to do, Jared?
I think he stays. I think for a multitude of reasons. Number one, the obvious that everybody's talked about, which is, where is he going to find in a better immediate situation? I don't think, unless he puts together some super team that we're unaware of, that we can't fathom right now because we didn't see guys opting out of deals or we didn't see trades being made or whatever it is. Obviously that's always possible. And LeBron and Wade and Bosh kind of showed us. I mean, nobody saw that coming 6 months in advance. So unless that happens, I say he stays. And I think the other part of it too is, I think we've now gotten into this cliche. Everybody and their mother knows the cap's going up. I don't think people really understand what that means. For financially for Durant, it's still this is a debate we could have for 14 hours. I understand, but I'm just going to open up a can of worms here. The NBA's biggest superstar. So I'm talking about the 1%, the top 5 players in the league are underpaid, right? And Durant's one of those guys. Yeah. And if he signs this year for a long-term deal, he is going to continue to be very underpaid. And maybe in the long run that actually helps his team because it creates more salary cap space. but I would be stunned if he signs a long-term deal anywhere this year, because in the next 2 to 3 years is when he's going to really be able to maximize, because he'll have enough years under his belt, and he'll be able to really, truly maximize the type of money he can make, which I think he should, because, you compare the NBA superstar to what actors in Hollywood make, and it's grossly underpaid.
Yeah. Jared, I don't know if you have a strong sense yet, although I'm sure you have certainly some opinions on the market for not just free agency, but the trade market this offseason. Obviously, Danny Ainge has a ton of assets, all those picks, and the couple of teams who are trying to probably trade up and maybe have an asset. I don't think Melo gets dealt, but you never know. Will it be a volatile summer? Do you think there's a lot of player movement, all encompassing both trades and free agency, or no?
Yeah, you're going to hear it from both sides. You're going to hear people say that this summer is overvalued. You're going to hear it's undervalued. I think next summer is going to be even better. But I think that there are players who can change a franchise's course. Like, for example, like a guy like Al Horford, who's going to be a massive free agent this year, right now playing for Atlanta. And people, I think, maybe around the country, maybe don't appreciate how much he means to a franchise. He's not going to go and be a superstar, number one guy on a team. But if you put Al Horford on and ask him to be the number 2 or number 3 guy on a team, I mean, that team automatically becomes a title contender. If Al Horford's a number 2 or a 3 on a team. Dwight Howard, I think, again, if we're talking about making him a number 2 or number 3, these are guys that can make a difference in a role that is different than what they currently have on their team.
And not if he's a 2, though, Jared. If he's a 2, that team's not winning a championship. You know that.
Well, yeah, if he's a number 2 with Kevin Durant, that's a different story. I think you have to be careful on just painting it with a broad brush here, because the circumstances truly do matter.
Yeah, but it's not. But Jared, it's not broad. I mean, we've seen it. At least me. I've seen enough of Dwight Howard to know that he's not a legitimate 2 on a championship team. He's not.
Okay.
You disagree with that? The guy's come on. Guy can't hit a free throw.
He was a number 1 without a number 2 or number 3. There's good teams in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, when he was 22 and he could jump, he's so physically compromised. Well, I'm surprised. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. No sweat off my back. But right. Dwight Howard, watch the Knicks wind up with Dwight. But I just think Dwight Howard is a diminished, compromised person, athlete, I should say.
No, absolutely. And everybody as they get older is going to go through that. And no question about it. What I'm trying to sell here to you guys is that just be careful thinking about a guy within their role, within a box that you have them in now, because that could very easily change in the next 2 months of what type of box the team puts them in. And then all of a sudden you think much differently about them and what you expect of them, right? Because what we've done for so long, and now it's going to be very hard to do, is we see a guy's price tag, and all of a sudden we slap an expectation on him. But now those prices are going to be so inflated from what we've ever come to learn and understand that it's not going to be very clear. Like a guy like this, like Biombo, if he makes $15 million a year, all of a sudden, is he a 1 now? Like,
yeah.
But that doesn't equate anymore the way it used to.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, it's just going to change the course. Like, if a team is a defensive stopper away from winning a title, and they go and pay Biz like Biombo $20 million a year, are you going to blame him? And then all of a sudden, you're going to make him a 1? No, that's not the way it works anymore.
I think that's a really good point. And I think that fans will